Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our study of the book of Psalms. Today we're in Psalm 127. Now, this psalm is a little bit different from most of the rest of the psalms, not so much because of its content, but because of its author. This psalm is attributed to Solomon, the son of David. Most of the Psalms were written by David or the sons of Korah or Asaph or various others that we've already talked about. But here you have a Song of Solomon. Now, Solomon is most well known for the writing of the Proverbs and the book of Ecclesiastes and the Song of Solomon. But Solomon is also stated in 1 Kings chapter 4 verse 32 to have written 1005 songs. We don't know what many of those were. We don't know what they included or what they entailed, but one of them is included here in Psalm 127. Now, as you look at the psalm, it's only 5 verses in length, and you would think from the way that it reads that there's actually two different ideas that are being discussed, almost like his Proverbs. But the reality is there's a cohesion to them, and I hope you'll see that in just a moment. But let's begin by reading the psalm itself. In Psalm 127, beginning in verse 1, we read these words: Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he gives his beloved sleep. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but shall speak with their enemies in the gate. As you look at Psalm 127, again, as I've already stated, it appears to be two distinctive thoughts. But let's look at them closer, and I think you'll see they go together. In the first 2 verses, Solomon says that the one who builds a house, if he does not have the Lord, he's laboring in vain. You have this used 3 different times in these first couple of verses of one of Solomon's favorite words, if you've studied the book of Ecclesiastes, and that is the idea of vanity, or that which is empty or worthless. And you have this argument that's being made that unless the Lord is involved in building the house, the ones who are doing it are wasting their time, in other words. And then in verse 2, he says, It's vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he gives his beloved sleep. And he's talking there about the restfulness or the peacefulness, that there's no need for the anxiety, for the worry, for the staying up late or the getting up early and worrying about what's going to happen. The Lord has it taken care of. One of the things when you start delving into this a little bit deeper that you begin to see is the fact that he's not talking about building a physical house or a physical structure. Instead, he's talking about the building of a household, the building of a family. That unless the Lord is involved in building a house, in building a family, that relationship that is bound there. And by the way, this particular statement is going to be quoted over in the New Testament as well. But unless the Lord is involved in that, it's not going to come out the way it should. It's not going to come out right. But rather, the Lord has to be a central component to the household, to the family, to the ideals and the principles and the guidelines that are being put in place. And when that happens, Solomon says, he gives his beloved sleep or rest or peace. Now, in the second part of the psalm, he's going to fold into this whole principle an appreciation and a value for what comes out of the building of that family, and that is children. And so he talks about the value of children there in verses 3 through 5. He says, Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with their enemies in the gate. Solomon talks about the fact that children are a heritage. They are an inheritance, is the literal idea of the term. They are that which is a blessing which comes forth from God. Too many times in our world, children are considered a nuisance. They are considered something that is undesirable. They are considered ones that are in the way of prospect or prosperity or joy or happiness or whatever the case might be. And yet Solomon says it's exactly the opposite, that when the Lord is involved in building the household, in building the family, children are not considered a nuisance, but instead they are found to be a joy. They are arrows in the hand of a warrior in many senses, because they are the training and the preparation of the next generation. The man who has his quiver full of them has something very special indeed. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is always going to go smoothly and that there aren't going to be times of intense frustration and struggle and even sorrow and pain. But it does mean that when the Lord builds the household, when the Lord builds the family, when the Lord is involved in putting those things together, one of the greatest blessings that comes, and that it becomes a part of that, is the children that are found within it. And those children can come from a number of different means. Normally we automatically look at the biological side of this, but I know so many people who have adopted children and various other things where there is that continuity, that family, that household that is built, even though it may not be like the typical means, that still brings that value and that joy and that completeness in many ways to their lives. What Solomon is giving us in Psalm 127 is a beautiful picture of how God views the family, but also how we should look at our family in our relationship with God, because God is the center of it. God is that around which everything else is built. And when we build it that way, we have something that is very beautiful, very wonderful, and something that functions the way God intended for it to. These are some of the things that I see in Psalm 127. I hope that they're beneficial to you. Thank you for watching the video today, and thank you for continuing joining us in our series on the book of Psalms. Next time, we'll come back and we'll look at Psalm 128. I hope you'll join us then. But until then, have a great day.